Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is AJ from the Pattern Journal, and today we're going to be talking about the finale for the first season of Star Wars: The Acolyte. And this has been an incredible 7 weeks journey as we explore a new era in Star Wars, especially where live action and animation is concerned, taken all together, because we have moved past, the expanded universe, which is now considered Legends. We've moved past all the other stuff that has come, the books, the comics, and everything. And, we are really bringing, or we have brought, a new era to the forefront that started just a few years ago with the High Republic series. And this show has been, I think, a good bridge between these two eras, because while I haven't read anything within the High Republic, I have the first few books, I have some of the comics, I will be getting to them at some point this year. I still think that this was a really good time to focus on because it moves us past the Skywalker saga. As much as I love that, it was good to move beyond that, beyond the Skywalker family, beyond the same kinds of characters we've been seeing for the last almost 50 years now. Like in another 3 years, it's going to be the 50-year anniversary of Star Wars. That's just crazy to think about. But, anyways, so the finale. Coming into it, I had so many questions. Like, how were the stories going to be resolved for every major character? Whether we would get some great cameos in or not. Because, there are so many characters that are directly or indirectly referenced. And, reading the subtext as a fan who knows a fair bit more than most about the future of Star Wars over the next, the 132 years or the 100 years or so, following on from this show to The Phantom Menace. And in many ways, I was not disappointed because we got to see some of the resolutions to the various stories for Saul, for Osha, for Chimere, even a little bit for Vernestra, but I still feel that it didn't quite end up being what we wanted it to be. And I have to say that I feel very disappointed with this show. The first 7 episodes, I think they were pretty great. They kept introducing a new element of the larger mystery, one after the other, and we got questions answered, questions raised. And this episode, I was like, okay, so this all needs to come together. There's a lot of stuff up in the air right now, but I'm trusting to the writers and to the showrunner and to the director to bring it all together in a cohesive whole. And, there's going to be sparks. I wanted there to be a lot of sparks because, this show has been very true to the core aspects of Star Wars, just like any other Star Wars show. Personally, I would say that there's never been any movie, any book, any comic, or any show that I've seen and read over the last, like 20 years, ever since I got into Star Wars, like full on, like 22, 23 years. There's never been anything that I've experienced that I feel run counter to the core aspects of Star Wars. Whether, we talk about the Clone Wars show, the Clone Wars movie, the Genndy Tartakovsky animated series, or Andor, Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. Like, some of the stories have had issues, yes, but everything has been core Star Wars, no matter where you turn, because it has all those elements, all those building blocks, and that is the case with this show. More than most, even, because it focuses so much on the Jedi Order, and it gives us a new perspective on these heroes of the galaxy because it shows that they're not infallible. They have their own quirks, they have their own faults, and they make bad choices. That's what makes for a really good story. And, overall, I think the show delivers. But whereas this episode is concerned, like I said, there were so many things up in the air, and I feel very disappointed. We kick off with, the Saul and May arriving on Brendok, and there's all the scenes involving Chimera and Osha on whatever planet they're on. As you know, we still continue with whatever is going on with Osha when she puts on Chimera's mask, his Cortosis mask, and there's like that's kind of I think from the get go things started to go a little bit haywire. Where the aspects with excuse me the aspects with Saul and May are concerned, you know, where when we see them last at the end of episode 6, Saul is like, okay, I'm going to tell you what happened, and this is something I've been waiting to tell you for the last 16 years, and now I have a chance, and I'm going to tell you. And then we switch to episode 7, which is all flashbacks. We learn more of the context on what happened on the night of that tragedy on Brendog, and it still felt like there was such a narrative disconnect because Saul is like, okay, I'm going to tell you what happened, but the framing for episode 7 isn't a narrative. It's not a story that someone is telling. It is, as the omnipotent viewer, this is what really happened. It's not from anybody's perspective. Particularly, these are the events that happened, and here's all this context. But now it's like we go from the ending of episode 6, we have all of episode 7, and then episode 8, the finale starts with, they just move on. They don't acknowledge anything of what happened. May is like, you killed our mother. And Saul is like, yeah, I did, but I did it for you guys, for you and Osha. But there's no acknowledgement that Saul actually told the truth. So we're still feeling, we still end up like, okay, so May still doesn't know what actually happened. She has the evidence of her own eyes, what she saw. She remembers that she started the fire. It somehow got out of control. She went to her mothers for help, Mother Anisea and Mother Coral. She went there. There was a confrontation with the Jedi. Mother Coral was trying to defend her, and she's calling for, and May is calling for help. Save Osha. There's a big fire, and Mother Anisea turns into this like Dracula smoke thing, and then that's it. And then she sees that Saul kills her, but where is the context for May? How is she going to understand what really happened? That doesn't happen in this episode. The characters are still moving forward with their biases. The only one who gets any kind of a reveal, so to speak, is Osha when she hears Saul's confession later down in the episode. And I felt like, okay, so this episode delivers on the action, it delivers on the cinematography, it delivers on the visuals, it delivers on all these other threads that are running around. But again, there's no cohesive whole. And you go back to the opening scenes with Chimera and Osha on their planet, and there's this element where she still has on the helmet, and Chimera is observing her, but then Osha's like, she's having some kind of a forced vision, and she's like, like kind of like doing this. She's jerking in the helmet, and Chimera he's like, okay, what the hell's going on? And he's trying to remove the helmet from her, but then he stops, and we get a throwback to when Mother Anisea was controlling Torben, and as we saw in episode 7, she was in his mind, talking with him. So there's that kind of a framing for that scene, where we get the transition, but it's never really explained. Okay, so what was going on? Did Osha just like tap into the deep reserves of her force potential, and she forced herself into Chimera's mind to remove the helmet because she couldn't do it herself? Or like it was just like, okay, this is really cool, I love this, but what is going on? There's no real context for that scene. It's just something that happens, and even afterward, they're just like, okay, so Osha's like, okay, I saw May, she had a saber in her hand, and Saul was dead, I think she says, or Saul was in front of her. No, she does say that Saul was dead, and Chimera's like, oh, so she learns how to kill without a weapon, and this is literally what he's been trying to teach May the entire season. kill a Jedi without a weapon. You kill with the Force. He alludes to this in episode 6 when he's trying to seduce Osha to the dark side, but Osha is trying to resist. But now this is like pretty much like, as most people expected, as most people divine, this is really what he meant. Use your inner powers to kill a Jedi Master. Killing them with a weapon is whatever. You can't really kill them with a weapon because they are going to be better than you. So you have to find a different way, and the different way is to use the Force, because that's where they're unchallenged. They consider themselves unchallenged because they think that the Sith are all dead and gone, they're extinct, and there really haven't been any Dark Jedi, presumably. So, the Order has lapsed. And, we see Chimere and Osha taking off from their planet and going to Brendok to confront Saul and May. And then there's there's a little bit switch in the viewpoint. You go back to that cave exit with the railings in front of it, and the ship is flying off. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit odd why they're showing that perspective. And then you see this creepy hand come out from the left of the screen towards the stone exit, and then the perspective switches and you see who that is. And it's just like, they show him. They show Darth Plagueis, Magister Hego Damask of Damask Holdings. They show one of the most devious Sith ever from Legends. And he's for those who don't know, Darth Plagueis, he was the master to Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine, also known as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. And he was one of the main driving forces for how events shape up in Episode 7 from the sidelines. Because everything that we see in Episode 1, sorry, did I say Episode 7? No, Episode 1. So everything that happened in Episode 1, actually, Darth Plagueis is still alive at that point, and he observes the arrival of Anakin on Coruscant. He's literally there on the platform, I believe, given what some of the spoilers I read for the book that he's in by James Luceno. And it's like, okay, I'm really vibing with this. My expectation was that, Chimere is like a rogue Dark Jedi, and the true Sith are going to arrive to deal with matters in this episode. But this casts a very different light on all of that. And you just left like, huh. So maybe Chimere was an apprentice to Plagueis all along? Because it raises way too many questions otherwise. And it's like, okay, I can get with this. This has to go somewhere. But, once again, spoiler, it never goes anywhere. That's it. That's the extent of Darth Plagueis in this episode, in this series. The true Sith, they are never really an element of the story at all. And there's just so much around that. But, the story, it builds up in a lot of different ways to something really cool about to happen, and then it takes a nosedive. That is literally what all of episode 8 is. There are some good moments. Like when you're on Brendok, and we are in the ruins of the mining fortress, and there's a big fight between not just Chimere and Saul, but also between Osha and May. And, it's so good. Chimere and Saul going at it with each other goes back to episode 5 when they were fighting on Pofar. And it's like, this is really good stuff. And we see just how good of a duelist Saul is. Like, he's no weak guy or whatever. Like, yeah, he has struggled with his emotions in the past, but he's really, really good fighter. And Chimera, even he is pretty damn good. And he does all the tricks that we've seen Sith use across the Clone Wars show, across the prequel movies. Throwing your saber, bringing it back, trying to trap a Jedi with it. But Soul, he is in the moment. He would have been like him and Qui-Gon would probably have been really good friends if they had lived, at the same time, in the same era. They would have been, I think, really good friends. But yeah, I'm still not over that fight. That fight was really good. And then, interspersed with that fight is the one that happens between Osha and May, because like the fight with Chimera and Soul, it takes place in the open yard of the fortress where Torben and Soul confronted Anastasia and Coral, and where they had the big fight with Kalnaka. That's where Soul and Chimera are fighting. Whereas Osha and May, they're fighting in Osha's room, in the ruins of that room. And it's like, it's a really good setting for the whole thing, right? And their fighting styles mirror each other, and it's just like, yeah, this is really good stuff. But then, Master Vernestra is about to arrive, and the whole stuff with Master Vernestra is like, yeah, she's like really concerned with what's going on. And we see when we are on Coruscant in the earlier parts of the episode, we see that Master Vernestra, she's still struggling to understand what happened on Gulfar. And also she's like, Senator Raincourt finally shows up. And surprise, surprise, it is David Harewood. Personally, I was expecting that David Harewood would be playing one of the true Sith. So it could have been Darth Tenebris and one of his Padawans, or sorry, one of his apprentices, maybe. Maybe, David Harewood could have been playing Hego Damask himself, Darth Plagueis himself. But no, he's playing Senator Raincourt. And I felt a little let down. Not just one way, but two ways. One, because I don't think that Senator Raincourt is really that interesting of a character. Like, he's the one who's trying to bring the Jedi to heel under the Republic, and he wants to control them, be like the oversight committee commissioner or whatever. And second, he's playing a human. It's like, we have humans aplenty, or near human races aplenty in Star Wars, and I was hoping that he would be playing a Bith, that would be Darth Tenebris, or playing Hego Damask himself, but he's playing just a regular human. Kind of feel like a letdown. Like, they have a huge budget. Apparently, it was like a $180 million budget for the show or something. And I was like, David Harewood doesn't need to be shown as being David Harewood. Like, you could have dressed him up, in some kind of like more finery or whatever, or, just make him an alien. Star Wars has so many cool, amazing alien races. He could have been playing any one of them. Maybe even a Zagarian, like with Yord's Padawan from Episode 1. Or maybe a Zabrak. That would have been cool. Really screw with the minds of people who are easily outraged. But he's playing a human, and it's like, yeah, that was a little disappointing. And, overall, I think that David Harewood's character is a real world comment on how a lot of people view the Jedi Order. And it's like an in-universe commentary thing, and that was a neat element added. But I don't think it was really that needed, But anyways, there were some really great sparks between him and Vernestra, and I was like, yeah, so they're totally setting up. We're definitely getting the end of the episode. We're definitely getting a scene where the chancellor has to assume oversight over the order and all that stuff. And I was surprised that Vanessa was very open with him regarding the current events. I didn't expect that. It was quite surprising. Because, like, yeah, you're just giving him more ammo to use against you. Like, do you really want to do that? But, I mean, I guess it works because she is caught between a rock and a hard place. There's no good solution for her here. And, maybe we'll see some more of her own inner conflict later down in the episode. Or we kind of do, but, again, anyways, coming back to Brendock, the fight scenes were really good. And I think they are not quite on the same level as the intensity of episode 5, but still pretty damn good stuff. Because, again, this is live action stuff. It's so much harder, I believe, to have a really good fight scene with lightsabers in live action. Like, they've done it in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. They've done it in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. They've done it in episode 5 of this show, and they did it in episode 7 of this show, and now they do it again in episode 8 of the show. There's this amazing consistency there in a lot of ways. And I was like, yes, this is what we wanted, this is what we got, and it really couldn't have been better. And it's just amazing that, in a space of less than a year, we had so many great lightsaber combat scenes in Ahsoka, and now again with the Acolyte. So it's like, where that whole aspect of Star Wars is concerned, the franchise is in amazing hands, and it really couldn't be better. Unless, maybe we get Anakin versus Obi-Wan again in some way. So that'll be good. But anyways, yeah, and then there's this whole resolution of the story as the writers give it to us. And I'm equally part saddened and disappointed with how the story ends, right? And it all the climax kicks off with Osha learning that Soul really did kill Mother Anisea. Like, earlier, May tells her that's what happened, and that she's been brainwashed by the Jedi, and they never told you the truth and everything. And Osha's like, you started the fire, you kicked it all off. But, there's the struggle to understand what May was telling her. I thought that was absent. We could have had, maybe another 30 to 40 seconds of dialogue that showed Osha's inner conflict. But we never really get that. What we do get is that when she finally confronts Soul for all his lies, all his deceits, even if they came from a genuine place of concern and his own emotional need to be a parent, be a teacher, the call deep within him. And in that scene, while they're confronting each other, Soul and Osha has Soul's lightsaber in hand. And, they pan to a scene where we're focused on just the lightsaber, and specifically the kyber crystal within the lightsaber, the blue crystal that, makes Soul's lightsaber blue. It's the key component. As Osha, her darkness overwhelms her, as she starts to become consumed by her anger and her hatred and her confusion, as the dark side is overwhelming Osha, we see that reflected in how the kyber crystal literally is turning red. And I cannot tell you how big a moment this is. We finally see, for the first time ever, in, probably 30, 35 years, or, 30, 35 years probably, this has probably been a lower element for like 35 years or so. A kyber crystal being drained to become a red crystal. Before, it has always been about how a Sith, there's this ritual they have to perform to, use the dark side to bleed a regular kyber crystal and, bloody it, essentially. That's why it turns red. And this is the first time we've actually seen this at all. Like, I cannot recall anywhere this happening in Clone Wars, or even I've really, recently seen, animated stuff like The Bad Batch season one. We never see anything like this, and that just like that was a serious moment of awe, you know. And it's like this was very unintentional, and it probably speaks to the intensity of the moment that Osha is so consumed that the crystal starts to bleed on its own without like she's doing it subconsciously. And when she finally, she turns it on, and initially there's a blue blade, but then the blade starts to turn red, and it's like, yes, like this is a really cool stuff, right? We have this moment in episode 5 when we see that Chimer, the stranger, is using Cortosis helmet and a Cortosis vambrace. And now again, like this is such a key aspect of how the Sith create their lightsabers. And it's like, oh, what? So like, there's all this cool stuff, right? But then say, Soul does have to die in that scene though, and it just leaves you, you know, there's this like defeatist element to the story, because even in episode 8, with everything as the viewer, still believes he did the right thing. He doesn't acknowledge that what he did was wrong. That him trusting his feelings to such an extent that he was wrong. Even though Master Bernestra warned him, even with everything, sorry, excuse me, with everything that's happened in the last few days, he still believes he did the right thing. And then, Osha starts to force choke him, and I was like, what do they say? Bittersweet isn't even the word that I think accurately describes my feelings in that moment. It's like, Saul has been such a great character. Episode 7 shows that he was a very flawed person, and he, despite his noble intentions, he did the wrong thing. And he should have answered for his crime on that night. And he's escaped that judgment for 16 years. But his judgment is finally here. And, you wanted him to live, you wanted him to suffer consequences, but you didn't really want him to die. And man, there's so much stuff here. But it's like, how do masters die? How did, like, you keep going through episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And, during Order 66, when Anakin comes to the Jedi Temple with the 501st, and they begin slaughtering every Jedi in the temple, whether Master or Knight or Padawan or Youngling. And, there's this deleted scene where Anakin kills one of the senior masters. It's like, this is that in reverse. This time it's not a hero of the Jedi killing other Jedi. This is a former Padawan killing her master. And that has such a dark, that's such a dark mirror to how the Sith lineage progresses under Darth Bane. The master has the knowledge. The apprentice craves the knowledge. When the apprentice has the knowledge, the apprentice kills the master and becomes a new master. So there's that dark element of the story where Osha, the Padawan, kills her master. She has the knowledge that she needs now, and she becomes a Sith. The show doesn't really. I don't think the word Sith is ever used here, but it's certainly setting all of that. And the way that Darth Plagueis makes his cameo, um, like 10, 15 minutes earlier in the episode, it's like, well, Chimere has his pupil, he has his acolyte, and then it's like, and then at this point, Chimere has his mask off. Vernestra arrives on Brendok with a large army of Jedi, more than were sent on Kofar even, and she's like she's trying to use the Force to perceive what's happening on Brendok, where Saul is, where everybody else is, and she divines where Chimere is, and there's this there's a quick scene where Chimere senses Vernestra senses Chimere, and they both have a shock feeling through them because Vernestra's like, you're still alive, and Chimere's like, oh shit, I screwed up, and then which confirms the theory that Chimere used to be a Padawan to Vernestra, and later on there's more fuel with the fire, where in one of the endings, we get more evidence of that. But from that scene, May and Osha and Chimere, they escape the fortress in their own way. Chimere goes off separately because he's trying to observe what Vernestra is going to do, and then May and Osha take off together, and we see how we get sort of an explanation for how May survived her fall, and she takes Osha to the trees that we see in episode 3, the special trees or whatever that were on Brendok, whereas very soon Master Vernestra and her entire teams of Jedi arrive in the fortress, and they see Saul lying dead in the middle of the courtyard, and again it's like Saul's death hits you hard as a viewer because it's just so painful to see, and there's this touching moment between the two of them. Master Vernestra, she's trying to divine all the events that happened there 16 years ago. She sees Saul's body. She observes, maybe she gets a feeling for how he was killed, and then she thinks that maybe her former pupil is still there, and it's like it's so hard to talk about that scene. Saul killed someone he shouldn't have. His actions, his emotional instability led to a great tragedy that led to the deaths of many more people, and he covered that up for all this time. But I still feel conflicted on whether he should have died. I fully expected him to die in this episode because Vernestra needs a scapegoat to blame Kofar and Brendok on. And Saul is like the most obvious choice. He's the only remaining survivor of Brendok from the Order, and there is no one else. Because Jedi have been killed, multiple Jedi have been killed, as Harewood's character, Raincourt, remarks. And it has to be a Jedi. And there's so much there, right? And then there's, skip ahead a little bit. There's a scene towards the end in one of the endings of the episode where Master Vernestra is talking about what happened, and she's telling the this one person that Soul was a friend of hers, a kind and compassionate man who made a terrible mistake and then covered it up for 16 years. And we get a mini flashback to when on Brendok itself, Vernestra lights a pyre for Saul and gives him a send off. And it's like that's when it's like the feelings start to come out, and it's like it reminds like it, Saul's character reminds you so much of Qui-Gon, because Qui-Gon, even in his time, he made some mistakes. One of his Padawans went to the dark side, Xanatos, that's his name, and he became a criminal mastermind. And Qui-Gon, the mistakes that he made them like the major difference between Saul and Qui-Gon is that Qui-Gon ultimately he accepted his mistakes and he didn't hide anything, whereas Saul did. And Qui-Gon sought guidance, Saul did not. But ultimately, they're in a similar way. They are killed by the villains of the show and the movie, and there's Qui-Gon. He is cremated on Naboo at the end of the movie. Here we see that Vernestra cremated Saul, and that was a hard watch. I'm not gonna lie, and it also makes me think, well, what did they do with all the bodies on Kofar? Yord, Jeki, the other Jedi who were killed by Chimera. Did they get some kind of a cremation or something? I think that would have been. They should have done that. The fact that we didn't get any of it, anything like that, is I think that does a disservice to those characters, because it's not like there was at least one master in that team on Kofar, other than Saul himself, and there was two bright futures of the Order killed on that day, right? Yord and Jeki, and it's like I really wish we had seen something. They deserved their send off. And then, it's so hard to talk about all of this. Because this episode does a great job on giving you emotional moments. They can be a little disparate, but you get that stuff anyway. And, that's a great step forward for the story itself, as it's being told in the show. But then, there's also the aspects where we start to get a resolution for the stories for Osha and May and Chimera, because Chimera, he meets up with the twins later on, and, he has to fix things. He lets May go. He wipes her memory and takes Osha as his apprentice, and they fly off. And then, May is just left to be discovered by the Jedi. She has lost all memory of the last 16 years. And Osha takes off with Chimera to become Acolyte and learn from him. And it's like they're back on the planet, and so what was that whole thing with Darth Plagueis? Like his cameo was cool. It was really creepy in so many different ways, but like in the good creepy ways. But then we don't get a payoff. What's the context? Like if at the end of the show, in that scene with Chimera and Osha, if we see them kneeling in front of Plagueis, or kneeling in front of Tenebris and Plagueis together, that would have been so amazing. Because then you're like, oh my god, it's like that would have solved so many different things. Gives you proper context for a lot of different stuff that's happened on this show, and it really, it adds so much to the stories moving forward if we ever get a season 2. But then, that was just the end, and we were back on Coruscant, and Vernestra is talking to May. They're telling him about Sol, and she's upfront with May that Sol killed her mother, and he covered up this tragedy, and I need your help to find Chimera, to find your master. Well, she doesn't say your master, and she doesn't know Chimera's name. She tells him that she needs May's help to find this former pupil of hers, and the word she uses, a pupil of mine who turned to evil. That's pretty much word for word what Obi-Wan tells Luke in Star Wars: A New Hope. That Darth Vader was a pupil of mine before he turned to evil. And, that was a great callback. And, there's been a few more moments like that in this show. And I've loved all of that because it helps to tie in all this stuff together, right? And it's really cool. And in that scene, you see that Vernestra is dressed in her senatorial robes. And then, we're cut to a scene with some senior senators of the Republic. And we have I believe it's the Supreme Chancellor himself present, and Rainforest present, David Harewood. And, she tells them what happened, but she gives them the light version. That, a tragedy happened, there was a force cult of witches involved, and Sol covered up everything, and then, he killed himself on Brenda. And, in both those scenes, you can really, I could feel Vernestra's pain. She does not want to, the way she talks about Sol, it's like, she really did have a very close relationship with Sol. In the first couple episodes of the show, it's like they seem a little removed, like they're acquaintances, but they're a little removed. But in this, in the finale, that we see these shades that they were close friends. Close friends, like how how to describe this. Some other close pairings we've had. I'm just struggling with names right now. But the Jedi who betrayed Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, her fellow Padawan, who blamed her for some of the bad stuff that happens in season 5 or season 6, I think. And the friendships that Anakin and Obi-Wan make in their time, and it's a reflection of that. And it's like, this is painful because there literally is no good option at all here for Vernestra. She has to answer to the Senate, and she has to tell this young girl in front of her of this tragedy, and she's just lost so many of her friends, her colleagues, her acquaintances. Possibly, Yord and Jackie might have even, at some point studied under her for something. And she's still, you can feel her inner struggle with this loss. And, it's a huge void within her. You can feel it. and the knowledge that a former student who turned to the dark side is still alive, it's like, it's another gut punch for her. And even the Senate is like, Rainport, he's just full on. Yeah, we need oversight. We need to control these people. They can't be trusted. If one of them goes rogue, we can't do anything. And there's so much about the history of the Jedi Order that it lends credence to his fears, whether they're justified or not. At this point in time, the fears are still there. The greatest enemies of free people in the galaxy have been Sith for the longest time. And while knowledge of the Sith has literally passed into legend and myth, the distant corners, but the Jedi is still here, and there are concerns. There are like within the Republic as a whole, they are a standing army, so to speak, that is above almost everything. They need to be brought to heel, and there are legitimate concerns here. But you got to think there's so much you could extrapolate here. Is Rain Court working for Plagueis? Is he involved with the Sith, or this is just some guy who's trying to get some power of his own, distinguish himself, establish precedents, and so on and so forth? So, yeah, that was good stuff. And then pretty much the final scene of the episode of the finale is. And then, we have the final scene of the episode. It's a defeated Vernestra, struggling with her own feelings, her own experience of the last few days. And she goes to one of the meditation chambers within the temple. And she says, Master, we need to speak. And, in that moment, who it's going to be. There's only one person she could go to at this point now, talk to get guidance from. And, yup, it's Master Yoda. We don't see his face. It's a back shot, but, man, it's like, it had to come at some point, right? And choosing to end on that scene was, I think, a really nice touch. And it ties in so many things, right? So we know now that Yoda knows of all these events. He knows so much more than we could have guessed. And we know that Ki-Adi-Mundi's statement from Phantom Menace, it still applies. He still doesn't know anything beyond what he's seen with his own eyes in episode, 3, episode 4, episode 2, episode 4. And it's like, man, like I'm at this point, I'm really unsure about how to really feel. Like, I love this ending, right? But it still leaves so much in the air. Like, where are the true Sith? The show was marketed as a story between Jedi and Sith. And the only true aspects of the Sith that we see in the entire 8 episodes of the show, like 4.5 hours of the show, is just that cameo with Plagueis. That, like, 5 seconds that we see him on the screen. And I feel let down because the marketing ran counter to what the story ended up being. But I can kind of understand why that was. Like, if they had said that, no, this is not really about the Sith, then, that would have probably caused a lot of people to not watch the show that at this point, they have. And it would have ended up being a little bit of a bad marketing for the show. but I'm still let down to the fact that they didn't do more. Like, they should have. These are the things that should have been planned properly, from the start. The true Sith should have been more of a force, because that's what Darth Bane's lineage is all about. They're about hiding in the shadows, manipulating everything, weakening the Jedi, cutting them off from the Force, and then taking control. So where is that aspect? Where is everything that we saw from Palpatine being reflected here? Not a whole lot, really. And I am still not happy that Saul is the only one to die. Like, if you consider, like, the perpetrators of the tragedy of Brendok, Torben, Saul, and Dara Kelnaka, they all die. We see some other collateral deaths, but Khmer survives, Osha survives, May survives, and it's like, I really expected more. Originally, this episode was called Doom, but as I saw today when I put it up on Disney Plus, the name has been changed to The Acolyte, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. There's only one death here, really. So it's like, now I kind of feel mad that Yord and Jeki died in episode 5. And there was, like, even Daphne was right in an interview she did post that episode. She was like, yeah, she really liked that her character died, and she liked the fact that her character wasn't safe. It was built up and then, literally cut down. And as of, the last few days, we also learned that Yord is actually a character that showrunner Leslie Headland, she created for the tabletop RPG that she played, whenever she did a few years ago as a kid or whatever. It was a character that she literally created herself, and so much of that character is just how she pretty much wrote him, apparently, and that was a really cool thing. I wasn't ready for the stats, so that episode sets you up for so much heartache. It delivers on the heartache. It promises more. The showrunner and the actors promise more, but then it's kind of like, it feels conflicting to only have Soul die. He got his judgment, he got his justice, but I feel that they should have gone more. The writers were so bold for those middle episodes of the season, and then things kind of get away from them, I feel. So the finale, it's not a bad finale, right? It does conclude a story. It doesn't conclude the story. It concludes a story, and it promises you so much, because now you're really expecting, yes, there should be an episode. There should be a season 2. Disney has to do a season 2. Like, these things cannot end here. If they do, it's going to be really sad. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand on the show, on the finale. And I thought it was okay. It was, as I've said in a tweet, it was both milquetoast, and it wasn't bold enough. You can see some aspects of that, but the writers didn't go all out like I feel they should have in this episode. The focus really narrowed here, and yeah, it could have been better. They could have done something like, if you watch Lord of the Rings, the third movie, Return of the King, the movie ends, like, the main story ends like 40 minutes before the end of the movie, like the actual end of the movie, because those last, like, half an hour, 40 minutes, it's just all an ending after ending after ending. because there are so many threads to tie up, and Tolkien literally takes you through everything. That's not what happens here. There's still so much stuff up in the air, and I feel that the finale exposes the key flaw of the show in terms of its story structure and in terms of its an overall narrative structure as well. Because this really shows that this needed to be a longer season. This needed to be bigger episodes. The story is incomplete, and I don't like that. When I watch a show, I want the full story to be told, and even if there is like the season ends, I want there to be some kind of continuation there, right? This one felt more like a mid-season finale rather than season finale. There's that weird thing going on with it, and I'm not happy about it. But yeah, hopefully Leslie Headland would have another interview for us to go over today, and there will be more details to come out with the show. Hopefully, news about the renewal, and I will cover all of that. But this is me signing off, and I will repeat once again, this was a great show in its entirety. In some ways, it was extremely bold, and it did new things that I really didn't expect. But in some ways, it also lets you down because it doesn't give you the payoff for all the big stories that are being told. And because it's like, it starts, like if you consider a pyramid, right? The story starts here. The story starts at the top. And as you move, it diffuses down. And there's like so much. But then it turns into okay, how to do this? It turns a reverse triangle, right? So it flips and it narrows down. But I feel like instead of, being that kind of a flip, it should be more like, it starts as like a triangle, then it turns into like maybe a square. So that's all there is. And hopefully there will be more Star Wars for us at some point. We are already starting to kick off into gear with stuff for Skeleton Crew, which is one of the next. I believe it's an animation episode. It's an animated show that's coming up. That's going to happen at some point. I don't know when, but I'm looking forward to that. And I hope it's as good as these last few shows that we had for Star Wars continues the trend. So anyways, that's me signing off, guys. Thanks for sticking around. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my stuff on social media. Everywhere, check out the other videos. And we'll be back with something else for Star Wars very soon. Like I said earlier, I recently watched The Bad Batch Season 1. It was me coming back to the show. I'd given up in the middle of Season 1, ages back, but now I sat through it and watched all of Episode 1, and I have so many thoughts about it. So we'll go over that in a different video, and then I'll catch up to Seasons 2 and 3 as well. So be sure to look out for that, and cheers. See you all soon. Bye.